The chandeliers at Loro spilled golden light across polished marble floors, catching on the rims of wine glasses and the shimmer of sequined gowns. The Friday night dinner rush moved with elegant rhythm, servers weaving between tables with trays balanced like offerings. Beneath the soft music and murmured conversations, tension lived in the air, unseen but heavy, like the heat from the kitchen that never fully escaped the walls. At the far end of the dining room, Table 12 glowed brighter than the rest, occupied by Senator Whitmore and his guests, their laughter expensive and rehearsed. Behind the server station, Mara Chen adjusted her apron, double-checking the numbers on the receipt Franklin Torres had just printed. Her pulse quickened when her eyes caught the figure at the bottom. $300 too high. Her pen hovered over the paper, her breath catching. The senator hadn't ordered the Brunello listed on the bill. He'd chosen the House Chianti, she remembered, because he'd smiled and said, "Nothing too fancy tonight." But the charge said otherwise. $300 of otherwise. Her hands trembled as she glanced toward the manager's office. Franklin was leaning against the counter, his tie loose, his grin slick and confident. His cologne clung to the air like something oily. He noticed her hesitation immediately. He always noticed everything when it came to control. "Problem, sweetheart." His voice carried false concern, stretched tight with the kind of authority that came from habit, not merit. Mara's throat felt dry. She wanted to say no, to paste on a smile and keep moving like the others did. But something inside her, something small and tired of being silent, refused. "The wine," she said quietly, her voice trembling but clear. He ordered the House Chianti. "This says Brunello di Montalcino." Franklin's grin didn't falter, but the warmth drained from his eyes. "That's a 280 difference," Mara added, her voice barely above the clinking of glassware around them. He leaned closer, the scent of his cologne overwhelming. "You questioning my management, Mara?" Her heart pounded so loud she thought everyone could hear it. She should have backed down. Every instinct screamed at her to nod, to apologize, to process the bill and move on. But she remembered the senator's kind smile, the easy gratitude in his tone when she'd refilled his water, and something about stealing from him made her stomach twist. "I'm questioning the bill," she said. The word theft lingered between them like a weapon she hadn't meant to draw. Franklin's smile vanished. Around them, the restaurant moved on in its golden illusion. Silverware chiming, laughter rising, the pianist's fingers gliding across ivory keys. No one noticed the quiet war unfolding in the shadows near the server station. "You want to repeat that?" Franklin's tone darkened. She stepped back instinctively, but he followed. His voice a low snarl meant only for her. "You want to call me a thief? In my restaurant?" Before she could answer, his hand shot out, gripping her upper arm. Pain flared beneath his fingers. "You're done for tonight," he hissed. "Actually, you're probably done, period. Let's have a conversation in the back about your attitude problem." He began dragging her toward the hallway behind the bar, the one she knew too well, where no cameras pointed, where servers went silent. Her shoes squeaked uselessly against the polished floor. Panic clawed up her throat. "Please," she whispered, trying to plant her feet. "I'll fix it. I'll process it. Too late for that," Franklin snapped. "You want to challenge me in front of everyone? Let's see how brave you are alone." But as he pulled her past the mirrored VIP suite near the bar, a voice cut through the air, quiet, calm, and heavy with power. "Let her go." Franklin froze. The grip on her arm loosened, and Mara stumbled back. From behind the mirrored glass, a man stepped out. He was tall, the kind of tall that commanded silence. His suit was charcoal and flawless, his dark hair touched with silver at the temples. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those eyes, were sharp as cut glass. "Mr. Moretti," Franklin stammered, his voice cracking. "I didn't realize you were here tonight. This is just a staff misunderstanding." The man's gaze didn't shift. "I said," he repeated, voice softer but colder. "Let her go." Mara's pulse thundered as Franklin released her fully, stepping back like a man who'd just realized the devil himself was standing in front of him. The restaurant carried on, unaware that its balance of power had just shifted. The stranger's gaze moved to Mara, steady and assessing. You did the right thing, he said quietly. Words meant only for her. That took courage. Then he turned away, buttoning his suit jacket with precision, and disappeared back through the mirrored door. Mara stood frozen, her breath uneven, the crumpled receipt still in her hand. Around her, the golden glow of Laura resumed its polished dance, but everything had changed. She didn't yet know who he was, only that the man who had just spoken those words could ruin empires or save lives. And he had seen her. The morning after the incident, Mara's hands still shook when she tried to tie her apron. The echo of that voice wouldn't leave her mind. It wasn't just power she'd heard when he spoke. It was something colder, quieter, and more dangerous. No one at Loro mentioned what had happened. The staff avoided her eyes. Franklin's office door stayed shut all morning, and rumors slithered through the hallways like smoke. By noon, Mara had convinced herself she was fired, but when she reached the time clock, her card was still there. Her name still printed neatly in black ink. She clocked in, unsure whether she was walking back into work or into her own trap. The restaurant looked different in daylight. The chandeliers were dark, the velvet curtains drawn open, exposing dust and fingerprints. Without the golden glow, the place looked tired, old, almost human. Mara cleaned tables, folded napkins, trying to fade into the rhythm she knew. But the air had changed. She could feel it, like something was watching. She was restocking glasses when Franklin appeared. His smile was gone, replaced by a strange stiffness. His shirt collar wasn't buttoned right, and his voice cracked when he said her name. Mara froze, heart pounding, waiting for him to shout. Instead, he said, "Office, now." She followed him slowly, every step echoing louder than it should. Inside, he closed the door and leaned against the desk, pretending calm. "About last night," he began. "Let's forget it happened. You got nervous. I got angry. End of story." She said nothing. His tone was too rehearsed. He wasn't apologizing, he was afraid. Then his hand twitched toward the drawer of his desk, and Mara's pulse spiked. But before he could reach it, the office door opened. The man from the night before stepped inside, his presence turning the air to stone. The room shrank around him. "Mr. Moretti," Franklin blurted, standing so fast his chair fell. "Sit," Alessandro said quietly. Franklin sat. Mara's breath caught as the man turned to her. In daylight, he was more than intimidating. He was impossibly composed, like someone carved from patience and authority. His suit was darker today, his expression unreadable. "I need to borrow your manager," he said to her without breaking eye contact. His tone was polite, but it carried something final beneath it. "You can take a break." Mara nodded and left, her legs barely working. As she closed the door, she heard Franklin's voice drop to a whisper. She didn't catch the words, but she heard the sound of fear, the kind that only came from someone who just realized they'd crossed the wrong man. Outside, she hid behind the wine rack, unable to leave. She shouldn't have listened, but she couldn't stop herself. Inside, Alessandro's voice was low and measured. "You altered the senator's bill," he said. "You've done this before." I don't know what you mean," Franklin stammered. A pause, then a sound. Something metallic sliding across the desk. Alessandro's voice dropped even lower. "You see this pen? It's worth less than that wine you charged. But unlike you, it's honest." There was silence. Then a thud. Franklin's breath hitched. "From now on," Alessandro said, "you'll be loyal to me. Not Hartley, not yourself. Me, and you'll keep your hands clean. Because if you don't..." He let the sentence die in the air. The silence finished it for him. When Mara finally dared to peek through the crack in the door, Franklin was pale as ash, sweat dripping down his temple. Alessandro stood calm, fixing his cufflinks like nothing had happened. Then he turned, and for a moment his eyes met hers. He didn't look surprised to see her watching. He simply held her gaze and said, in a voice so calm it chilled her, "Honesty has a price, but so does silence." He left without waiting for an answer, his footsteps measured, unhurried. Mara stayed frozen long after he disappeared. She didn't know what he meant yet, but deep down she understood something she couldn't explain. That man wasn't just her boss. He was the reason the world inside Laura was about to change. and whether she wanted it or not, she was already part of his story. Rain hammered against the windows of Mara's small apartment that night, as if the city itself was restless. The restaurant had closed early, something that had never happened before. Everyone was sent home with nervous glances and whispered questions. Mara sat on the edge of her couch with her notebook open on her knees, staring at the words she'd written months ago. Dates, names, prices, all the little pieces of corruption she had noticed, but never had the courage to say out loud. Her brother Tommy called from the bedroom, his leg wrapped in a brace from the accident that had stolen his job and her peace of mind. "You didn't eat," he said, voice tired. "I'm not hungry," she answered softly. She flipped the page of her notebook, running her finger over a line that read, "Franklin, extra charges, customer complaints erased." Her pen hovered above the paper, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The man from the restaurant. Alessandro Moretti. His voice had followed her home like a ghost, deep and steady, the kind that didn't need to raise itself to make you listen. Every part of her wanted to forget the way he had looked at her, like he could see everything she was too afraid to say. But another part of her wanted to know more. Who was he really? And why had the manager, who usually bullied everyone, turned pale at just one glance from him? Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message read, "Come to Loro at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Bring your notebook. Ask for Michael Santos." Mara's stomach dropped. She didn't know whether to be terrified or relieved. She had thought she was finished with that place, yet something about the message felt like a door opening. She hid the notebook inside her coat and tried to sleep, but the rain didn't stop, and neither did her thoughts. The next day, the restaurant was almost empty when she arrived. The golden chandeliers were lit again, but their glow felt colder. A man in a black suit stood near the entrance. His build was solid, his movements silent. "Michael Santos," he said when she approached, his tone polite but sharp, like a man who had no time for lies. "Mr. Moretti is expecting you." He led her upstairs to an office she had never seen before, a room behind the mirrored VIP suite. It was nothing like Franklin's cluttered space. The walls were lined with books, a single orchid bloomed on the desk, and the scent of espresso hung in the air. Alessandro stood near the window, sunlight touching the edges of his dark hair. "Mara Chen," he said without turning around. "You keep detailed notes. That's rare in this city." Her hands tightened around her coat. "You read my notebook." "I read everything that happens in my business," he said. Franklin thought he was clever, stealing from customers and selling information to people who want this restaurant to fail. "You wrote what others ignored." She couldn't tell if he was praising her or warning her. "Why am I here?" she asked. Alessandro turned then, his eyes unreadable. "Because I don't believe in accidents. You saw something that shouldn't have happened, and you refused to stay silent. I could fire you and no one would question it. But I think you understand things Franklin never did. What loyalty means." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photocopies of her notebook pages. Her pulse spiked. "You copied them," he nodded. "For your protection. Those pages are evidence now." Mara stared at the papers, the realization crashing through her. He wasn't just the owner. He was building something far beyond a restaurant. "Help me clean this place," he said quietly. "Not with mops or ledgers, with truth. I need someone who knows what happens when I'm not watching." "I'm just a waitress," she said. "No," Alessandro replied. "You're the only honest person in a room full of masks. That makes you dangerous and useful." The rain started again outside, tapping against the glass like a warning. Mara hesitated, torn between fear and the strange pull she felt in his voice. Finally, she whispered, "If I do this, what happens to Franklin?" Alessandro's expression didn't change. "He'll learn that some debts can't be paid with money." He reached for his coat and handed her a business card. "Keep your notebook safe. From now on, you report to me." When she left the room, the world felt different. The mirror she had once walked past 100 times was no longer just a reflection. It was an entrance into something much darker and far more powerful. And though she didn't know it yet, the decision she had just made would pull her into a war between truth and corruption. One where the cost of honesty was measured in blood, not money. Mara walked into Loro the next morning with a different kind of silence in her chest. Not fear this time, something sharper. The restaurant looked the same as ever. The gold light spilling across the floor, the polished tables gleaming. But she could feel the shift beneath it all. The staff whispered when she passed, and Franklin's door stayed closed. Everyone sensed that something was coming, but no one dared to speak it aloud. She started setting up her section, folding napkins with trembling fingers, when Michael Santos appeared beside her. His expression gave nothing away. "Mr. Moretti wants to see you," he said. No explanation, no warmth, just an order. He led her through the back hallway toward the mirrored VIP suite. She'd never been inside before. It wasn't a dining room at all. It was an office built behind glass, where Alessandro could see the entire restaurant without anyone realizing it. The air smelled faintly of espresso and smoke, the kind of scent that followed men who didn't sleep much. Alessandro sat behind a desk, sleeves rolled up, his tie undone. Papers were spread across the surface, files marked with names and numbers. Without looking up, he said, "Close the door, Mara." She did. The sound of it shutting seemed to seal her inside a different world. "Do you know why Franklin didn't show up today?" he asked. Mara shook her head. "He's missing. Someone warned him last night that I was coming for him." Her stomach tightened. "Who would do that?" "That's what I want to find out," he said, finally lifting his eyes to her. "Hartley has people inside my business. People I trusted." She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hartley? The developer?" He nodded. "The one who wants to tear down this restaurant and replace it with luxury apartments. Franklin was selling him access to my books. Every stolen dollar was part of that plan." Mara's mind raced. "Then why me? Why bring me into this?" He leaned back in his chair. "Because you see what others ignore. You write everything down. You remember details. That's not fear, it's instinct. And I need that." He stood, walked around the desk, and handed her a thin folder. "These are his last transactions. I want you to look at them and tell me what doesn't add up." She opened the folder and saw numbers that didn't make sense. Supplier invoices that doubled overnight, names she didn't recognize, and one transfer made to an account labeled MN Consulting. Her breath caught. "That's not a supplier. That's Franklin's initials." Alessandro smiled faintly. "Exactly. You've just confirmed what I suspected." He walked toward the window, looking down at the restaurant floor below. "I built this place to look legitimate. A clean front for money that wasn't always clean. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what honest work looked like. Then you walked in." His voice had softened, but his eyes stayed cold. "So now we change the rules. We use your truth to destroy men like him. Are you ready for that?" Mara's heart pounded. She wanted to say no. She wanted to walk away, to go home to her brother and pretend none of this was real. But she couldn't. The thought of Franklin hurting someone else the way he'd tried to hurt her burned too deep. She met Alessandro's gaze. "What do you need me to do?" "Be my eyes," he said. "Keep working here. Pretend nothing's changed. I'll handle what happens behind the curtain." He stepped closer, his voice low enough to make her pulse quicken. "And Mara, if anyone asks, you never saw me here today." He turned back to his desk and poured himself a drink. The amber liquid caught the light, glowing like fire. "You're in the middle now. There's no safe side anymore." As she walked out, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall. For the first time, she didn't see a frightened waitress. She saw someone who could bring down men who thought they were untouchable. In the reflection behind her, Alessandro watched in silence. And though she couldn't see it, a faint smile crossed his face. The kind of smile a man wears when he's already started a war he knows he'll win. But neither of them realized that Franklin wasn't gone. He was waiting, watching, and planning his return. And when he did, it wouldn't just be money or revenge he was after. It would be her. The next evening, the restaurant pulsed with noise and perfume, and the quiet desperation of people pretending their lives were perfect. The laughter of the rich echoed off the golden walls while Mara moved between tables like a shadow. To anyone watching, she looked like any other waitress, but inside her heart was a drumbeat of secrets. Somewhere among the guests was Franklin Torres, back from his so-called disappearance. She had seen him slip in just before the dinner rush, wearing a cheap leather jacket and a smirk that made her stomach turn. She tried to steady her hands as she carried a tray of champagne. Franklin was talking to a man in a gray suit near the bar. The man's watch gleamed with a tiny gold crest, a symbol she had seen once before on the paperwork Alessandro showed her. Hartley's company. Her pulse quickened. Franklin had come back to finish what he started. From the mirrored suite above, Alessandro watched through the glass. He saw everything. The servers moving, the deals disguised as dinner conversations, and Mara's nervous glance toward the bar. He saw Franklin too, and his jaw tightened. He had given Mara a simple order: act normal, observe, and do not confront him. But he knew her well enough now to realize she would not stay silent if someone was being hurt. That fire was why he chose her. That fire was also what terrified him. Franklin leaned closer to Hartley's man, sliding a small envelope across the bar. Mara couldn't hear the words, but she saw the exchange of hands and the flicker of greed in Franklin's smile. She turned quickly and nearly collided with a server carrying wine. The tray tipped and a splash of red landed on her sleeve. It was enough to catch Franklin's attention. Their eyes met across the room. His grin faltered. Then, slowly, he started walking toward her. She stepped back, heart hammering. The restaurant felt smaller with every breath. When he reached her, his voice was soft, almost kind. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. "I work here," she whispered. "Not for long. You think Moretti can protect you? You don't even know who he really is." His tone shifted, sharper, crueler. "He's worse than me, sweetheart. You just can't see it yet." Mara's throat tightened, but before she could speak, a hand landed on Franklin's shoulder. Alessandro stood behind him, calm and silent. The noise of the restaurant faded as if the world itself was holding its breath. "Franklin," he said, voice low and steady, "I was hoping you'd come back." Franklin froze, color draining from his face. Alessandro's hand stayed firm on his shoulder, a gesture that looked friendly to outsiders, but carried the weight of a threat. "Let's talk," Alessandro said. "My office." They disappeared into the mirrored suite. Mara tried to return to work, but her hands shook too badly. She slipped behind the counter near the espresso machine, pretending to fix a glass while her mind spiraled. Inside the suite, the air was heavy. Franklin tried to laugh, but it came out strangled. "You don't scare me, Moretti," he said. "I've got friends now. Real ones." Alessandro leaned against the desk, his expression unreadable. "Hartley?" he asked quietly. "Those friends?" Franklin's smile faded. "I told you once," Alessandro continued. "I don't tolerate betrayal. You sold me out. You stole from me. And you put her in danger." "She's just a waitress," Franklin snapped. "That's where you're wrong," Alessandro said, his voice turning sharp as broken glass. "She's the reason you're still breathing." Franklin blinked. "What?" "She told me everything. I almost let you walk. But then you threatened her." Franklin lunged, fury overtaking fear, but Alessandro moved faster. He caught Franklin by the collar and slammed him against the wall, the sound muffled by the glass. From outside, the diners kept laughing, unaware that violence was breathing just above them. "I don't kill in my own house," Alessandro said quietly, "but I can erase a man from this city in less than an hour. Choose carefully, Franklin. You disappear tonight or you answer to me in the morning." Franklin's voice cracked. "You think she's innocent?" "She's just another pawn to you." Alessandro's grip loosened for a fraction of a second, and Franklin used it to stumble out the door, running into the crowd outside. Alessandro let him go, knowing exactly where his men were waiting. Downstairs, Mara saw Franklin push through the exit and vanish into the rain. Her stomach twisted, unsure if she should feel relief or dread. Moments later, Alessandro appeared beside her, composed as ever. "It's done," he said. "What did you do?" She asked quietly. "Removed a problem," he replied. "Now we move to the next step." "What step?" He looked at her, and for the first time there was something raw in his eyes. "You're not my waitress anymore, Mara. You're my partner, and together, we're going to burn the lies that built this place." The words left her breathless. Outside, thunder rolled across the city like a warning. Somewhere in the dark, Franklin wasn't gone. He was waiting. And he had just made a deal that would make the next storm far deadlier than anyone could imagine. The city never truly slept, but that night it felt haunted. Rain slid down the windows of Loro in silver streaks, and the streets outside shimmered with reflections of red and gold lights. Inside the restaurant, everything looked calm again, but it was the kind of calm that came before something terrible. Mara stood behind the bar cleaning glasses she had already cleaned twice. Every laugh from the guests, every ring of the cash register felt wrong. Franklin was gone, yet she couldn't shake the feeling he was still close, watching. Alessandro hadn't spoken much since the confrontation. He worked from the suite upstairs, eyes on every corner, every whisper. His presence filled the room even when he wasn't there. The staff behaved differently now. Polite, careful, terrified. Mara could feel the tension under her skin like static electricity. Near midnight, Michael Santos approached her with a note. "He wants to see you," he said simply. Her pulse skipped. The hallway behind the VIP suite was dim, lit only by the faint glow of the chandeliers spilling through the glass. She stepped inside and found Alessandro standing by the window, the city reflected in the glass behind him. He didn't turn when she entered. "Franklin didn't leave the city," he said quietly. "He met with Hartley's men an hour ago." Mara's heart stopped. "How do you know?" He turned then, his face shadowed, eyes sharp. "Because he used your name." The words hit like a blow. "My name?" "He told them you had my files. That you stole them for him. He thinks if he delivers you, Hartley will protect him." Mara took a step back, shaking her head. "That's not true." I know," Alessandro interrupted, his tone steady. "But they don't. Which means you're in danger." She felt the world tilt beneath her. "What do we do?" His gaze softened just for a moment. "You trust me. That's what we do." He opened a drawer and pulled out a small silver flash drive, placing it on the desk between them. "This contains every transaction Franklin and Hartley used to launder money. You'll take it to the police tomorrow morning." Her breath caught. "You want me to expose them?" "I want justice," he said. "But it has to come from someone clean, someone untouchable. That's you." Mara stared at him, unsure whether he was saving her or sending her into a storm. "If I go to the police, they'll know it's you behind it." Alessandro smiled faintly. "Let them guess. By the time they figure it out, Hartley will already be finished." Lightning flashed outside, bathing the room in white for a split second. It made the scar near his jaw glint like silver. He looked both human and dangerous, like a man who had already chosen damnation if it meant saving something good. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. "Why not just handle this your way?" He took a step closer, his voice low. "Because I've done enough my way. It's your turn to show me a better one." Before she could reply, Michael burst through the door, face pale. "Sir," he said urgently, "you need to see this." He handed Alessandro a phone. On the screen was a live video feed from outside the restaurant. Franklin stood in the rain, surrounded by 3 men in dark coats. One of them was Hartley. The camera zoomed in as Franklin pointed toward the restaurant doors. "They're here," Michael said. "They're coming in." Alessandro's jaw tightened. He looked at Mara. "Stay behind me no matter what happens." The doors of Loro swung open downstairs. The laughter of the dining room turned into whispers, then silence. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Hartley's men moved through the restaurant like a shadow swallowing light. Mara's heart pounded as Alessandro stepped out of the suite, his presence radiating authority that stopped everyone in their tracks. Franklin's wet hair clung to his face as he shouted, "There she is! The girl! She's the one with the files." Guests gasped. Cameras from phones started to rise. For a moment, the world held its breath. Alessandro walked forward slowly, his voice cutting through the chaos like steel. "You shouldn't have come back, Franklin." Hartley smiled coldly. "We're here for the waitress. Hand her over and we walk away." Alessandro's expression didn't change. "You think I'd trade her for my safety?" "You'll trade her to stay alive," Hartley said. Something in Alessandro's eyes darkened, the calm before a storm. He stepped forward until they were face to face. "Then I guess we both died tonight." Before anyone could react, the restaurant lights flickered and went dark. The sound of glass shattering filled the air. When the lights came back on, Hartley's men were on the ground, and Franklin was gone again. Alessandro stood breathing hard, his hands still trembling from the fight. He turned to Mara, voice hoarse but certain. "They'll come again, but next time, we'll be ready." Mara looked at him, her fear swallowed by something deeper, a fire she didn't recognize in herself. The war had started, and she wasn't just a witness anymore. She was part of it. The city was still asleep when Mara woke to the sound of her phone vibrating on the nightstand. The screen showed only 2 words from an unknown number. "They know." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She sat up, clutching the blanket like it could protect her. Outside, the streets of Chicago were wet with dawn mist, and somewhere beneath that quiet, danger was moving. By the time she reached Loro, the air already felt different. The usual chatter of staff was gone. Chairs were stacked, tables empty, and the doors locked from the inside. Michael stood at the entrance, checking his watch, his face unreadable. He handed her a small black earpiece and said, "He wants you upstairs. Now." When she entered Alessandro's suite, she found him standing over a table covered with maps, phone records, and blueprints. The soft light from the window painted half his face gold and the other half shadow. He didn't look up as he spoke. "Hartley's men are making their next move tonight. They're planning to destroy every piece of evidence that ties him to Franklin, including us." Mara froze. "How do you know?" He turned then, eyes cold and alive with purpose. "Because one of my men turned on me. I found this on his phone." He slid it across the table, a message from Franklin. "Midnight. Meridian Tower." All files burned. The girl's next. Her stomach twisted. "The girl," she whispered. "That's me." Alessandro nodded. "Which is why you're not going anywhere near that tower." "I'm not hiding," she said. Her voice trembled, but she didn't back down. "This started because of me. I can't just disappear while you fight my battle." He stepped closer, his gaze sharp but softening at the edges. "Mara, you're brave. But they're not like me. They don't follow rules. They kill first, think later." "Then teach me your rules," she said, "because I'm done being the victim in this story." He stared at her for a long moment before exhaling, a small, reluctant smile forming. "You really don't scare easy, do you?" "I'm terrified," she said. "But I'm here anyway." That was enough. By nightfall, the plan was set. Alessandro's men would surround the Meridian Tower, where Hartley kept a hidden office. The flash drive Mara held contained more than just files. It carried the trap Alessandro had created. When Hartley tried to destroy it, it would send copies of every incriminating document to the police and the press at once. As the car drove through the dark streets, Mara sat beside Alessandro in silence. The hum of the engine matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. Every corner they turned felt like the edge of a cliff. He looked out the window, his hand resting against his jaw, eyes lost in the reflections of passing lights. "When this is over," she said softly, "what happens to us?" He didn't answer right away. "If we win, you go back to living free. If we lose, at least the truth doesn't die with us." The elevator to the 42nd floor was silent except for their breathing. When the doors opened, the air felt thick, almost electric. Hartley's men were already waiting. Gunmetal glinted in the shadows. Alessandro moved first, grabbing Mara's hand and pulling her behind him. "Stay down," he ordered, voice calm but fierce. The corridor erupted into chaos, shouting, footsteps, the crash of glass. Mara crawled toward the desk where the servers hummed quietly. She plugged in the flash drive, her fingers shaking, whispering a silent prayer that the plan would work. A shot rang out, echoing through the room. She turned, heart seizing. Alessandro was on one knee, blood staining his sleeve, but his eyes were still on her. "Finish it," he shouted. Her vision blurred as she hit the final key. A small light blinked green. Data transferred. Files duplicated. All over the city, reporters and agents received the truth in real time. Hartley stormed into the room, his fury barely human. "You think this will stop me?" he hissed. "It already has," Alessandro said through clenched teeth. Sirens wailed in the distance. Helicopter lights cut through the windows. The city was waking to the truth at last. Hartley turned to run, but Michael appeared in the doorway, gun drawn. "It's over." Hartley lunged, but before he could reach her, Alessandro stepped forward, his blood trailing behind him, and threw one final punch that sent Hartley crashing through the glass table. Silence followed. The first police officers burst into the room moments later, shouting commands, weapons raised. Mara dropped to her knees beside Alessandro. His breathing was heavy, shallow. She pressed her hands to his wound, whispering his name again and again as if it could hold him there. His hand found hers. "You did it," he said weakly. "You ended it." Tears streaked her face. "We did it." Outside, the city lights shimmered like 1,000 witnesses. Justice had finally found its way through the darkness, but at a cost neither of them had yet counted. And as Alessandro's eyes closed, Mara realized the war wasn't over. It had only changed shape. Rain lashed against the hospital windows as night swallowed the skyline. The city that once glimmered with noise and greed was now quiet, the silence heavy with aftermath. Mara sat in a plastic chair beside Alessandro's bed, her eyes fixed on the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. Every beep reminded her that he was still here, but barely. His arm was wrapped in gauze, his skin pale, his breathing uneven. The police had taken Hartley away hours ago, but the danger still hovered like smoke that refused to clear. A knock on the door broke the quiet. It was Michael, his dark suit still damp from the storm. "He's stable," he said softly. "But the news is everywhere. They're calling you a hero." Mara didn't look up. Heroes don't get people shot. He stepped closer. He knew what he was walking into. He wanted you out of it. She finally turned to him. And look where that got him. Michael sighed and placed a small envelope on the table beside her. "This was in his jacket. He told me to give it to you if something happened." She opened it slowly. Inside was a key card with a note written in Alessandro's tight handwriting, for when the truth tries to rewrite itself. "What does that mean?" she whispered. Michael hesitated. "There's a second server, hidden off-site. Everything we leaked last night was only half of what he had. The rest, names, bank routes, partners, could bring down every man Hartley worked for. But if they find it first, they'll erase everything." Mara felt a cold rush through her veins. "Where is it?" "The key card opens a vault in the basement of Loro," he said. "You have until sunrise. After that, they'll come for it." She looked at Alessandro again, his chest rising weakly beneath the white sheets. "He'd tell me not to go," she said quietly. Michael's voice hardened. "Then you already know what you have to do." By the time Mara stepped out into the night, the storm had turned savage. Wind tore through her coat as she ran through empty streets, clutching the key card like it was the last piece of her soul. The city lights flickered above her, the thunder echoing off glass towers. When she reached Loro, the restaurant was dark. The golden chandeliers hung like ghosts in the dark ceiling. Water dripped from the roof, the smell of smoke still lingering from the fire that had broken out during the raid. She slipped inside through the back door, flashlight trembling in her hand. The hallway leading to the basement felt longer than it ever had. Every sound made her flinch. The creak of a floorboard, the hum of the generator, the whisper of rain through cracked glass. She reached the vault door and swiped the keycard. The lock clicked. Inside was a small room lined with metal shelves and servers humming faintly. Papers were scattered across the floor, torn, burned, half erased. She plugged in Alessandro's flash drive and started transferring files. The screen glowed green as data filled the bar. 90% complete. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Purposeful. Her breath hitched. She turned off the flashlight and crouched behind the desk. The door creaked open. A shadow moved across the wall. A familiar voice whispered, "You really should have stayed home, sweetheart." Franklin. He stepped into the room, water dripping from his coat, a pistol gleaming in his hand. "You and your noble Mafia prince ruined everything. Hartley's gone, my money's gone, but at least I can take something back, starting with you." Mara's pulse thundered. She scanned the room, eyes landing on a broken bottle glinting near her shoe. "Do you even know who he really is?" Franklin continued, circling the room. "You think Moretti's some kind of savior. He built his empire on blood long before you showed up. He's no better than me." She waited until he stepped closer, his shadow falling across the server lights. Then she grabbed the bottle and swung. It shattered against his wrist. The gun fired, deafening in the small room, but the shot missed, grazing the wall. They struggled, his strength overpowering hers until he slammed her against the server rack. Sparks flickered. The transfer bar blinked red. Error. Mara's breath came in ragged gasps. She pushed with everything she had, kicking him backward into a pile of cables. Franklin fell hard, the gun skidding across the floor. She lunged for it, hands shaking. But before she could reach it, a voice thundered from behind her. "Enough." Alessandro stood in the doorway, pale, bleeding through his bandages, eyes burning with fury. "You touch her again, and I end you." Franklin laughed through broken teeth. "You're half dead, Moretti." "Half of me is enough," Alessandro said and fired once. The bullet shattered the light above them, plunging the room into darkness. When the emergency lights came on, Franklin was gone, leaving only blood and footprints leading toward the exit. Alessandro collapsed against the wall, his breath shallow. Mara ran to him, catching him before he fell. "You shouldn't be here," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I told you," he murmured weakly. "I don't let the people I care about fight alone." She looked at him, trembling, the truth hitting her harder than the gunfire. "Care about?" He smiled faintly. "More than you think." The final light on the server blinked green again. The transfer complete, the truth saved. But outside, somewhere in the storm, Franklin was still alive. And the war that began inside Loro was about to spill into the streets. The morning came cold and gray, with a fog that swallowed the skyline. The city felt uneasy, as if it knew a reckoning was coming. Mara sat on the edge of Alessandro's bed, exhaustion etched in every line of her face. He was still weak but alive, his wounds cleaned and his mind already working again. The news channels played quietly in the background, every headline screaming the same words: corruption network exposed, Hartley in custody, police under investigation. The truth had finally broken free, but the cost had been high. Alessandro opened his eyes, his voice rough. "He's not gone, is he?" Mara shook her head. "Franklin disappeared after the vault. The police have no trace. It's like he vanished." He stared at the ceiling, jaw tightening. "He won't vanish. Men like him don't disappear. They hide until they find another way to destroy you." She reached for his hand, her touch gentle but trembling. "You need rest. We'll deal with him when we have to." He looked at her then, eyes dark and clear. "No, we deal with him now. Because he's not coming for me. He's coming for you." Those words stayed in her head long after he fell asleep again. She couldn't shake the feeling that every shadow outside the window hid eyes watching her. Later that afternoon, while Alessandro met with the police, Mara went back to Loro to clean what was left of the chaos. The restaurant smelled of smoke and rain, the golden chandeliers covered in dust, the mirrors cracked. Yet beneath the wreckage, something about the place still felt alive, like the heart of it refused to die. As she wiped down a counter, she found something wedged under the register. A phone. Not hers, not any of the staff's. She turned it on, and a video message appeared immediately. Franklin's face filled the screen, bruised and smiling. "Hello, Mara. Surprised? You shouldn't be. You think you won? You didn't. I've got one more secret. Something even your precious Moretti doesn't know." Her hands trembled as the video shifted, showing a photograph of a man with a familiar tattoo. One of Alessandro's men. The image zoomed in to reveal files, payments, and surveillance footage, proof that someone inside Alessandro's circle had been feeding information to Franklin all along. Mara's breath caught. "No," she whispered. The message ended with a final line. "If you want to save him, meet me tonight, alone. Pier 37, midnight." She didn't tell Alessandro. She couldn't. If the traitor was real, anyone around him could be part of it. She slipped the phone into her pocket and walked out into the misty afternoon, her resolve hardening with every step. When the clock struck midnight, the pier was empty except for the whisper of waves hitting the wood. Fog curled through the air, and somewhere in the distance a bell rang. Mara's footsteps echoed against the planks as she looked around. Then she saw him, Franklin, standing near the edge, one arm in a sling, a pistol glinting in his good hand. "You came," he said, his voice low and amused. "I didn't think you had it in you. Where's the evidence?" she demanded. He chuckled. "It's not about evidence anymore. It's about balance. You took everything from me, so now I take what you love most." Before she could move, headlights cut through the fog. A black car stopped at the end of the pier, and Alessandro stepped out. He looked pale but deadly, his eyes locked on Franklin. "You should have stayed buried," he said. Franklin laughed bitterly. "And miss this reunion? No chance." He lifted the gun and fired once. The sound split the night. Mara screamed as Alessandro dropped to one knee, clutching his shoulder. Rage and terror collided inside her. Without thinking, she lunged at Franklin, slamming into him with all her strength. The gun flew from his hand, skidding across the pier and falling into the dark water. They fought, wild and desperate, until Franklin's foot slipped on the wet wood. He fell backward, catching the railing, his grip faltering. "Mara!" Alessandro shouted, stumbling toward them. She stood over Franklin, her chest heaving, rain mixing with tears on her face. He looked up at her, eyes filled with hate and something like pity. "You're just like him," he whispered. "You think you're better, but you're not." For a second she hesitated. Then the wood cracked beneath his feet. He fell into the water, the sound swallowed by the fog. Silence. Mara stood frozen, unable to breathe. Alessandro reached her, wrapping his good arm around her shoulders as she shook. "It's over," he whispered. "He's gone." But even as he said it, they both knew it wasn't truly over. The waves below churned violently, and somewhere in that darkness the past refused to drown. The police found no body, no footprints, only the echo of a man who had learned how to survive in shadows. As dawn broke, Alessandro and Mara stood side by side, watching the sun rise over the city that had nearly destroyed them. She leaned against him, exhausted but alive. He whispered, "We ended the war." She looked at him, eyes still wet. "No," she said softly. "We just changed who's winning." The sun rose over Chicago, but peace didn't come with it. News anchors called it closure. The city moved on, but deep down, Mara and Alessandro knew Franklin was still out there. Days turned into weeks, and life tried to pretend it was normal. Loro reopened under quiet ownership, stripped of gold and glamour, rebuilt with honesty and light. The once intimidating restaurant now smelled of fresh bread and coffee instead of secrets. Customers returned, unaware of the war that had been fought in its walls. But the calm felt wrong, like silence before thunder. Alessandro's wound healed slowly, but his spirit didn't. He hid it well behind his calm voice and sharp suits, but Mara could see the unrest behind his eyes. She had started to smile again, but every sound outside made her flinch. They both carried ghosts, invisible but heavy, and one night those ghosts finally returned. It was a Thursday evening when the storm broke. The restaurant had just closed, rain whispering against the windows. Mara was counting receipts in the dim light when the front door creaked open. She turned quickly, expecting Michael or one of the night staff. But the man who walked in wasn't supposed to be alive. Franklin stood at the entrance, soaked to the bone, eyes sunken and wild. The scar on his cheek looked fresh, his expression colder than she remembered. "You thought you could erase me," he said quietly. "But I learned from the best. You and your king taught me how to survive." Mara froze, her hands trembling over the register. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I shouldn't be alive either," he said with a smirk. "But here we are." He pulled out a small device from his coat pocket, a detonator. "Everything you built, everything you love, burns tonight. You'll watch it fall, just like you watched me fall." Before she could scream, Alessandro appeared from the back hallway, calm but deadly. His voice was steady. "Put it down, Franklin." Franklin turned slowly, his grin widening. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" "You came here to finish something," Alessandro said, stepping closer. "But you forgot one thing. You're already finished." The tension in the air felt alive. Rain pounded harder against the windows. Mara's heart raced. Franklin's thumb hovered over the trigger. "One more step and this whole place goes up," he warned. Alessandro's voice softened, almost too calm. "You won't do it. You think you want destruction, but what you really want is control. That's what you've always wanted. Even now, you're waiting for someone to stop you." Franklin's jaw clenched. "You think you know me?" "I know you're afraid," Alessandro said. "Afraid no one will remember you after this. But I promise you, Franklin, they will. For the coward you became," Franklin snapped, screaming as he pressed the trigger. Nothing happened. He looked down, confused. Alessandro raised his hand, revealing a small wire between his fingers. "You really shouldn't leave explosives lying around where electricians can reach them." Franklin's face twisted with rage. He lunged forward, knife flashing in his hand, but Alessandro moved faster. The struggle was brutal and silent. Two men locked in the reflection of everything they'd built and broken. Chairs crashed, glass shattered, rain poured in through the cracked door. Mara screamed for them to stop, but neither heard. The knife fell first. Franklin hit the floor next, breathing hard, blood mixing with water. Alessandro stood over him, soaked and shaking, his hand bleeding from the fight. "It's over," Alessandro said quietly. Franklin laughed weakly. "You think killing me fixes you?" Alessandro's expression softened with something that almost looked like pity. "No, but it fixes her future." He turned to Mara, his voice steady now. "Call the police." Franklin's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're not even going to finish it?" "No," Alessandro said. "You don't deserve my hands. You'll live knowing you were beaten by the people you called weak." The police came within minutes. Franklin was dragged away screaming, his voice echoing through the rain. "You can't change what you are, Moretti. You'll always be one of us." But for the first time, Alessandro didn't look back. Weeks passed. Loro became more than a restaurant. It became a symbol. The media called it the place that exposed a city's corruption. Donations flooded in for victims of Hartley's schemes. Mara ran the new operations, her name replacing the men who once ruled in greed. Alessandro rarely appeared in public now. He preferred the shadows, but not because he was hiding. He was rebuilding himself. One evening, just before closing, Mara found him sitting in the corner booth, staring at the rain. She slid into the seat across from him, smiling softly. "We survived," she said. He nodded. "You did more than survive. You made something honest in a world that doesn't know what that means." She reached across the table, her hand covering his. "You helped me," he shook his head. "No. You helped me remember what kind of man I wanted to be." For a long moment, they said nothing. The rain slowed outside, the lights dimmed, and the sound of quiet jazz filled the room. Then Alessandro stood, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "This isn't what you think," he said with a faint smile. "No grand proposal, not yet. Just a promise." He opened it to reveal a simple gold key. "To the new Loro. It's yours now." Mara stared at it, tears filling her eyes. "You're leaving?" "For now," he said. "The city needs to forget me if it's going to remember you." She rose, placing a hand against his chest, feeling the steady beat of a man who had walked through darkness and found his light. "And if I need you?" she whispered. He smiled softly. "Then I'll be where I've always been, watching, not hiding." He left into the night, the rain catching the glow of the streetlights, his figure fading like a shadow walking toward redemption. Years later, Loro stood as a landmark of truth, run by the woman who once was too afraid to speak. And somewhere, far beyond the city's noise, a man watched the sunrise over the horizon, finally at peace, knowing the war was truly over. Because for Alessandro Moretti and Mara Chen, the story wasn't about vengeance or survival anymore. It was about the courage to rebuild in the light after living too long in the dark.